The gym at Elmridge High was buzzing. Folding chairs scraping, bleachers packed, banners swaying above the stage. But in the third row, left side, one man sat like stone. His name was Solomon Dryden. Deep blue marine dress uniform. Boots shined so bright they caught the gym lights. Not because he was showing off, but because he didn't know how to do things halfway. He'd driven 8 hours from Temple, Texas, to see his son graduate. 8 hours in the same Dodge Charger his late wife loved. That morning, he'd pulled a worn photograph from the glove box. His wife holding their baby boy, Tyron. He slipped it into his jacket pocket and whispered, "I promised you." In that crowded gym, with the smell of popcorn and floor wax mixing in the air, Solomon had one goal. Watch his boy walk that stage. Nothing else mattered. Not the stares, not the whispers about the uniform, not the looks he'd learned to read long ago. But two men were about to change that, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. The music had barely faded from the national anthem when they appeared. Two security guards in black polos and cargo pants, moving down the aisle toward Solomon with the kind of confidence that comes from thinking you're in control. They weren't police. Harlan Security Services, names stitched in yellow on their chests. One short and broad, shaved head and tight jaw. The other tall and lanky, chewing gum like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sir, you need to come with us," the short one said. Solomon turned his head, calm as ever. "Is there a problem?" "This section's for families of graduating seniors," the tall one added. Solomon reached into his jacket and handed over the ticket he'd already shown at the door. "Third row, family seating." "Confirmed." The short one didn't even glance at it. "We were told it's full." Solomon's voice stayed level. "It was full when I sat down too." "Who gave that order?" They didn't answer. Instead, they pushed again. "Let's just move to the back. No need to make this into anything." But Solomon wasn't going anywhere. A few heads started turning. Someone in the bleachers tilted their phone, maybe recording. An older woman next to Solomon leaned in and whispered, "Don't you let them move you." The guards kept pressing. "You'd be more comfortable in the back," the tall one said. And Solomon knew exactly what that meant. That phrase wasn't about comfort. It was the same quiet exclusion he'd felt in boardrooms, waiting rooms, even mess halls. Always polite, always coded, but always the same. He stayed still, hands on his thighs, eyes forward. The short one adjusted his radio, muttered into his mic. The air in the gym shifted, that quiet tension when people realize a line's been crossed. And then, the first man stood up. 10 feet away, a tall man in a dark coat crossed his arms and stared. He didn't say a word. Then another man stood on the opposite side of the gym. Then another. They weren't dressed alike. They didn't sit together. But anyone who knew what to look for would see it immediately. The way they moved, scanned the room, planted their feet. Solomon didn't turn. He didn't have to. He knew these men. They were brothers in a way that had nothing to do with blood. Men he'd pulled through mud, fire, and worse. 6 Navy SEALs, scattered through the crowd, now rising without a word. The guards hadn't noticed yet. They were about to. The short guard leaned in again. "Listen, man. You're making this into a situation. And you're not listening," Solomon replied, low and even. Before the guard could answer, a voice cut through the space between them. "Is there a reason this man's being bothered?" Came from the man in the coat, Creed Marston. Years ago, Solomon had dragged him out of the wreckage in Kandahar while bullets tore the sand apart. Creed didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You don't have this under control," Creed said. "Not anymore." The guards froze, finally sensing they were on unfamiliar ground. And the room went quiet. 15 years earlier, Kandahar province. The desert sun didn't set. It crashed. A roadside IED flipped the lead Humvee like a toy. Then came the gunfire, not scattered, precise. Through the dust and smoke, Solomon spotted 6 men pinned behind burning wreckage. Creed was one of them, bleeding from the leg, dragging another man to safety. Solomon didn't hesitate. He sprinted across open ground, lifted a mangled hood just enough for a trapped SEAL to crawl free, and hauled the wounded toward the ridgeline. When the gunfire stopped, All 6 were alive. No speeches. No celebration. Just a bond that would never break. Back in the gym, that bond was about to show itself again. Creed stepped forward. You don't put your hands on that man. You don't tell him to move. You don't ask again. The short guard glanced at the tall one. Neither spoke. More SEALs rose from their seats. No words, no signals, just instinct. By now, parents were openly watching. Some recorded. Others just stared. The principal appeared, whispering urgently to the guards. Whatever she said, it was enough. They stepped back. Faces flushed. Hands empty. The SEALs stayed on their feet. Silent. Solid. And Tyron Dryden, standing in line with the other graduates, had seen every second of it. From across the gym, Tyron had been watching since the anthem ended. First, he thought it was nothing. Then he saw the way his father sat. Still, composed, but locked in. He recognized that look from years ago, when a 12-year-old Tyron had come home in tears and his dad had just sat there, steady as steel. When the first man stood, Tyron knew it wasn't random. These weren't just parents. These men knew his father, and they weren't going to let anything happen to him. Pride swelled in Tyron's chest. Not just for himself, but for the man in that chair. The ceremony moved forward, but the air in the gym had changed. Then came the moment. Tyron Dryden. The name echoed, and for a beat, the room was silent. Then the applause started, but not just from proud parents. The 6 SEALs clapped in perfect unison. Strong, steady, deliberate. Tyron walked across the stage, chin high, took his diploma, found his father in the crowd. Solomon didn't wave. He didn't stand. He just smiled. And Tyron understood everything in that one look. 20 minutes later, caps had been thrown. Balloons bobbed in the hot Texas sun, and families crowded the lot. Tyron spotted his father by the flagpole. They met halfway. You okay? Tyron asked. I am, Solomon said. Are you? They tried to move you. I know. I was ready to walk off that stage, Dad. I swear. And that's why you didn't, Solomon said. Because you knew I could handle it. And you handled your moment like a man. Tyron nodded. Who were those guys that stood up? Men I bled with, Solomon replied. Men who know what loyalty means. Men who don't forget. They disrespected you in front of everyone, Tyron said. Yes, Solomon replied. And everyone saw it. But they also saw the truth. 6 men who could have been anywhere else, standing without being asked. Because they knew what that moment meant. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the old photograph. I've carried this through war, through losing your mom, through today. Not because it gives me strength, but because it reminds me what's worth protecting. Tyron's voice dropped. You always knew who had your back. I didn't need to know, Solomon said. I just had faith. Son, Solomon continued. Life will hand you 100 chances to react with anger. Sometimes it's justified. But most times, silence cuts deeper. Dignity lasts longer. That's what people remember. Tyron sat with that. The charger idled quietly. Some people shout to be seen, Solomon said. Others sit in silence and are never forgotten. If you've been listening this far, you already know, this isn't just a story about a graduation. It's about what real strength looks like. If that's something you believe the world needs more of, click that subscribe button right now. Because here, we share stories that remind you what honor, loyalty, and respect really mean. Outside, the last of the SEALs were getting into their vehicles. Creed gave one last look toward the charger. Solomon nodded back, no words. Tyron grinned. So what now? Now, Solomon said, turning the key. You get to choose dinner. Waffle House. Of course. They pulled out of the lot, the school shrinking in the rear view. That day would be remembered in Elmridge for more than diplomas or speeches. It was the day an entire gym learned that true strength doesn't have to shout. It only has to stand. Fade out.